From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Rescue workers are searching for survivors after a landslide in Colombia killed almost 20 people and left many others injured. Heavy rains have battered the country, leaving thousands affected. Our correspondent Tatiana Portela has more.
The death toll for the landslide, which occurred in the Cauca province on Sunday, stands at 17. 13 people have been reported missing, while several others have been injured. The president of Colombia, Iván Duque, visited the area and assured affected persons that the government will send humanitarian aid. He added that people will be relocated to safer areas. This incident could have been prevented. However, the company, which was hired to investigate the possibility of such events occurring, did not begin the task. People have been waiting for at least 4 years to be relocated to allow for the investigation. One of the affected persons informed us that they were expected to be relocated since they have water issues. Rescue workers are currently looking for survivors and missing persons under the mud and rubble. Members of the community are calling on the government to attend to their needs as there has not been financial investment in the region. The roads are in a poor condition as well as the housing.
Tatiana Portela from Colombia. And the Colombian Senate has started discussing the objections raised by President Iván Duque over the special jurisdiction for peace. 6 modifications were proposed by the government for a law which would allow the GAP to carry out its work. They were all denied by the lower house of Congress on April 9th. Now the Senate has to decide on those same amendments until June 20th. This proposed law was part of the peace agreement signed with the FARC and the government to investigate and judge people who participated in the armed conflict. At least 25 people died when a passenger bus crashed in Bolivia and plunged into a ravine. President Evo Morales offered condolences to the victims' families on social media. The bus is said to have skidded on the wet road and collided with 2 cars before plummeting roughly 300 meters. At least a dozen people have been injured. And the president of Bolivia is on an official visit to Argentina. On Monday, Morales met with his counterpart, Mauricio Macri. They discussed matters such as the continued cooperation in natural gas exports, the political situation in Venezuela, strengthening the Paraguay-Paraná waterway, and the purchase of military planes for Bolivia. Following his arrival on Sunday, Evo Morales held a meeting with the country's Bolivian community, where over 5,000 people joined him. The death toll has risen to almost 300 in Sri Lanka after 8 bombs exploded in the city of Colombo on Sunday. More than 500 people have been injured, leaving many disabled. Police have arrested 24 people in a series of raids. The government has extended sympathy to the victims of the blasts and has offered compensation to the families.
For everybody who died, as the compensation to the families, 1 million, and also that for those who are injured and according to their injuries, from 100,000 rupees to 300,000 rupees to be paid, and also all the churches damaged to be completely repaired and renovated by the government expense.
Meanwhile, a state of emergency has been declared by the Sri Lankan government following the deadly attacks. The measures are to follow the police and the Sri Lanka armed forces to ensure public safety. Government has blamed the armed Islamist group National Tawheed Jamaat, though no one has claimed responsibility for the bombings yet. There are reports that several people have been killed when a magnitude 6.3 earthquake struck the Philippines in the island of Luzon. Terrified locals ran into the streets of the capital, Manila, as the quake sent skyscrapers swaying. The local media reported some structures had collapsed and that the Clark International Airport, a former U.S. military base, suffered some damage and had closed. U.S. Secretary of State and former director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, is bragging about the way he ran the intelligence agency. He was speaking at the Texas A&M University last week, and this is what he had to say.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses. it reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
The Venezuelan opposition and its allies in the U.S. government continue to set their sights on Venezuelan embassies and consular offices, seeking to take control of them. In an act of solidarity, activists projected images and messages onto the embassy, including the iconic eyes of the late President Hugo Chavez. Messages displayed also read, "No U.S. imperialism in Venezuela" and "End sanctions now." The 8th edition of Venezuela Theater Festival has come to an end. Called Scenario of Peace, it had more than 400 activities and the participation of 8 other countries.
Venezuela served as a platform for cultural exchange. For 10 days, various national and international groups showed their artistic skills on stage.
This has always been a platform to show the customs of not only Venezuelans, but from other countries as well. The most important thing is that we are showing different ways to spread our message. We all learn from each other, and it's something that Venezuela and mainly Caracas can be proud of.
Performing arts took a leading role in the streets, communities, and theater rooms of the capital, in a festival that achieved great recognition despite the difficult situation of the South American nation.
We have showcased displays and it has all been good, because people can distract themselves from the many issues that have happened in the country.
During the course of this event, various genres were showcased, such as comedy, drama, magic shows, and fiction, all with the purpose of entertaining the Venezuelan people.
Our constitution considers culture as a right. Cultural spaces and recreation are a right for all Venezuelans. These activities are good for all kids, so that they can take part in creative endeavors. It is also a space for peace, a space for coexistence.
The repertoire of theater companies from Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Spain, Mexico, and Venezuela made the unity of people a reality. During the 8th edition of the International Theater Festival, Venezuelan actor and puppeteer José León was honored for his over 50 years in the art world.
In other news, former CARICOM Secretary General Sir Alistair McIntyre has died in Jamaica. McIntyre also served as a Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. He was knighted by the Queen of England in 1992 and received the prestigious Order of the Caribbean Community Medal. McIntyre was also twice honored by Jamaica's government and received the island's Order of Merit. As regional airline Liat attempts to navigate financial turbulence, Barbados Prime Minister is holding talks with European partners on possible funding for the Caribbean's transport sector. Mia Marley says she has started discussions with the European Investment Bank in that regard. She, however, opted not to provide details and stopped just short of mentioning Liat. Shareholder governments have been pondering the future of the airline. Liat is facing imminent closure as most shareholder countries are not responding favorably to a request for a $5.4 million bailout. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is set to become the Caribbean's most sustainable island. Headmaster at Richmond Vale Academy, Stina Herberg, said the country will achieve this through diverse agriculture, moving away from imported fossil fuels and chemicals, and planting gardens in every village. She added that the island is leading in solar and geothermal energy. Herberg said over the next 10 years, a network of eco-sites will thrive and promote tourism on the island. Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness says that the island is recovering from the brink of economic collapse. Holness was speaking at a recent Jamaica-Atlanta business meeting. He said Jamaica had a debt-to-GDP ratio of 142% and an IMF loan that required a surplus of 7.5%. He said the debt has been reduced to just over 100% and is expected to reach 60% in the coming years. Holness said the island recorded its lowest ever unemployment rate.
We have brought our unemployment rate from hovering 13 to 14%. I'm very pleased to report that we are now at 8%, the lowest ever in the recorded history of unemployment in the country. Yes.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. Ugandan police have arrested Member of Parliament Robert Kyagulanyi, known by his stage name of Bobby Wine. The musician turned politician was arrested on Monday on his way to a media conference where he was said to speak out on police brutality, injustice and abuse of authority. Officers blocked the lawmaker's convoy as his supporters clashed with police who tear-gassed the crowd. Earlier this month, Wine said he would challenge President Yoweri Museveni and run for his post in 2021. He has been arrested several times before for failing to receive authorization to carry out protests and concerts. The African Union has reissued the call for the military council in Sudan to transfer power to a transitional civilian-led political authority. During a meeting in Khartoum, the head of the African body, Moussa Faki, reaffirmed the Union's commitment to ensuring a peaceful transition of power. Last week, the Union gave the military 15 days to transfer power or face suspension from the bloc.
There are some differences between all parties. This needs more effort. We, as the African Union, are ready to support the Sudanese throughout this phase. God willing, they will reach an agreement which will allow for a safe transition and will allow for a civil government to govern this nation during this period, preparing an atmosphere for free and fair elections. I will prepare a report for the Peace and Security Council within the African Union about everything I have seen here in Sudan. God willing, I believe the whole continent will understand what is happening here and we will find a solution in Sudan.
Yet protesters in Sudan are still demonstrating at the army complex, despite military leaders ordering them to dismantle their barricades. Demonstrators have accused the military council offering of no change from ousted President Omar al-Bashir. The demand to reopen roads came after protest leaders suspended talks with the military council about a civilian-led government.
The suspension of talks was a very logical outcome, because ever since the fall of the tyrant al-Bashir, the military council has been stalling and attempting to take power and monopolize it. This is power that the council does not deserve, and that is supposed to go to the revolutionaries and the free people.
The president of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, has rejected the so-called deal of the century with the United States. During an Arab League meeting in Cairo, Egypt, the president said that the U.S. has nothing to offer to the Palestinian people. Our correspondent there in Cairo, Nayara Tardo, has the details.
The president of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, arrived in Cairo on Saturday afternoon for an urgent meeting called by the Arab League. The meeting focused on the situation in Palestine and the territories occupied by Israel. The meeting took place yesterday afternoon at the Arab League headquarters in Cairo and analyzed the need to politically and financially support Palestine. It also rejected the poorly named deal of the century proposed by the current United States administration for the Middle East, an agreement that wouldn't benefit the Palestinian people. We've seen in previous reports and from local sources that the proposal seeks to establish Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and also aims to annex the whole West Bank for Israel. It doesn't acknowledge the Palestinian refugees' right to return to their homes in Palestine. The president of Palestine announced his intention to achieve national Palestinian reconciliation despite Hamas's rejection of this internal reconciliation. Hamas has control over the Gaza Strip, while the Palestinian Authority has their base in the occupied West Bank. Also under discussion at the meeting was the need to support the Palestinian budget, as we've said earlier, through the final declaration at the Arab League meeting, which proposed to activate a security net of $100 million in order to face the challenges that the Palestinian people are facing. They also spoke of the uncertainty following the Israeli election results, which went in favor of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has pushed a campaign against the Palestinian people and has also allowed further illegal Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank, destroying Palestinian homes and forcing the displacement of Palestinians from the West Bank. As we've said, the deal of the century included the annexation of the West Bank by Israel.
That was Nayara Tardo from Egypt. And the Algerian interim president Abdelkader Ben Salah has called a meeting to discuss mechanisms for setting up an independent body to organize elections. Politicians, lawyers, and civil society have gathered in the capital Algiers to negotiate prior to election preparations. The vote is scheduled to take place on July 4th, and the interim president Ben Salah is not eligible to participate.
All Algerians are concerned and seek a solution to their country. It is with these beliefs, which I and the National Liberation Front Party share, that we turn to everyone else so that we can discuss. We discuss with the press, with politicians, philosophers, all to find a solution to our country.
But protesters are continuing to demand the removal of the remaining allies of former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. On Saturday, a court summoned former Prime Minister Ahmed Ouyahia and current Finance Minister Mohamed Loukal, close associates of Bouteflika, investigating the misuse of public funds. Thousands of protesters marched in Morocco demanding the release of 42 activists who had rallied against corruption and unemployment. It comes weeks after a court upheld prison sentences for the activists who participated in protests in 2016 and 2017. Authorities accused them of threatening the security of the country. The so-called March of the Moroccan People was organized by political, civil rights groups and families of the detainees. Ongoing fighting in Ain Sara, south of Libya's capital, has left the suburban town filled with rubble. On Sunday, powerful blasts believed to be caused by airstrikes left buildings damaged and cars burnt out in the streets. The Libyan National Army launched an attack to seize Tripoli on April 4th and has continued clashing with forces of the UN-recognized government. At least 227 people have been killed, with over 1,000 wounded in the weeks-long violence. And according to the World Health Organization, more than 250 people died in the conflict around Tripoli in the past week, and about 1,000 people have been injured. The WHO said specialized emergency medical teams in frontline hospitals are handling major surgeries to treat the wounded. We have more stories coming up. Stay with us. Thank you for joining us again. Spain is preparing for a highly contested general election to be held on April 28th. Voters are turned at the polls with the current PSOE government leading the race for Moncloa. However, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez will likely need to form a coalition to continue to rule. Negotiations to form a new government will be tough. Sánchez previously relied on the support of Basque and Catalan sovereignty parties, but lost their support, forcing him to call this election.
Exercising the powers I have as Prime Minister of Spain, I am announcing that with the previous deliberation of the Cabinet, I have proposed to dissolve Parliament and to call a general election on April 28th.
Meanwhile, the rise of the far right in the country is causing concern, with the ultra-nationalist Vox party having performed well in regional elections in Andalusia earlier this year. The success of Vox has driven other parties further to the right. Catalan independence, abortion and taxes are three of the main topics present in the Spanish general election campaigns. However, recent surveys suggest that the Spanish people are more concerned about the unemployment rate and the corruption.
60% of Spanish people think that the unemployment rate and the lack of opportunities are the country's main problems. But what measures are the parties proposing in order to improve the situation? The right-wing Popular Party speaks about reducing corporate and income taxes, while the similarly aligned Citizens Party advocate the creation of a so-called universal contract.
We propose to end the so-called garbage contracts and to create a permanent single contract for everyone. So from the first day, people can start their jobs with the same opportunities. That way, if you are young, you don't have to face an invisible wall that blocks you from progressing and having a permanent contract, something that we're seeing right now in Spain.
For its part, the left wing has criticized the universal contract, saying it leaves workers even more unprotected. The Socialist Party proposes to reform the labor law, while the Together We Can Party talks about improving workers' negotiating position.
We have a labor market that generates precarious work and wage stagnation as a consequence of a disconnection between salaries and productivity. We need to reinforce the collective power to negotiate, which is currently broken, so that when productivity increases at a company, salaries can also rise.
One of the main policies introduced by the previous administration was the increase of the basic salary to 900 euros. The measure was branded by the right wing as an attack on job creation. However, the left wing defends the decision, and the Unidas Podemos party even proposes to increase the minimum wage to 1,200 euros.
Despite the deceit of increasing the basic salary for just 3% of workers, taxes have risen for the immense majority. That's meant that job creation in the last 3 months is less than half of what it was in the same 3 months last year. What's more, over 50,000 people have become unemployed.
The rise of basic salary has meant a 7% increase for social security funding.
There are 9.7 million pensioners in Spain, so the sustainability of pensions is one of the country's 5 main problems. The left wing congratulated itself for the rise in the pension budget, while the right-wing Popular Party defended itself from those who say they're trying to change the system from public to private.
Even when we were on the edge of the economic crisis, we kept the pensions and even increased the budget. But now we have to make some reforms so that current pensions, just like those in 2050 and 2060, are guaranteed.
It looks like we are prophets of doom. It looks like the pensions are a risk. They are not. And actually, the Socialist Party is committed to revaluing the pensions related to the Consumer Price Index.
The electoral campaign has failed to focus on the second most important concern of the Spanish people, corruption and fraud. Instead, the debate focuses on the Catalan situation, which less than 11% of people are worried about.
The United States is reportedly planning to reinforce sanctions for countries that import oil from Iran. In November, the U.S. sanctioned exports of Iranian oil after President Donald Trump pulled out of the 2015 nuclear deal. At the time, Washington also granted waivers to China, India, and other countries. According to the Washington Post, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, will announce that as of May 2nd, those countries could face sanctions if they don't stop importing Iranian oil. At least 170 Israeli settlers entered the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied East Jerusalem. The group entered the mosque escorted by heavily armed Israeli security forces, reportedly to celebrate a religious ceremony. Palestinians consider such an act a direct threat to their sovereignty, as break-ins have been going on for several days. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is considered a holy site by Christianity, Judaism, and Islam for thousands of years. Last month, Israeli forces clashed with Palestinians who tried to enter the mosque, which led to its closure. Across the globe, people are celebrating World Earth Day. Events and campaigns are being held worldwide as a rallying call for environmental protection. In Madagascar, environmental activists explain how human behavior has negatively impacted the country's forests and wildlife.
They come, they put wedges underneath, and then, with their knife, they remove the bark like that, all the way along. They actually clean the wood. Take a look at this one. It's ebony. The guys from the town of Tamatave who buy the wood from these poachers, they're buying it at 1,000 area a piece, ebony or non-ebony. It gets sold. 1,000 area, just like that.
With that, we end our news brief, but you can read more of these stories by going to our website, english.net. For our viewers in Africa, you can find us on Starsat, on channel 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria. And you can join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.